I'm Stan Carlton. I'm the Equipment Maintenance Coordinator, Management Coordinator. I never can remember my own title. From Alabama Department of Transportation, glad to be here. We want to talk just a little bit about what each of our states are doing in terms of lighting innovation. I can tell you pretty quickly what Alabama is doing. I can use any color light I want to use as long as it's amber. Our state code does not necessarily, in every instance, tell you what colors you can use. They tell you what colors you cannot use. And in our case, we cannot use white rear facing. We cannot use red rear facing. We cannot use blue at all. Only law enforcement can use blue, and in the state of Alabama, only emergency services such as fire and ambulance can use red. And at the current time, green is restricted to security operations, which primarily is operated either on private property or public property and not on highways. Don't get scared. I'm going to show you just a few of the slides that Dr. Ullman showed us earlier this morning. All of you have access to go to this slide program, as well as all of the printed documentation from the research project that we had. I would encourage you to do so. The full document is quite heavy. I don't know if you want to read. I think it's 114 pages if you guys look. Yeah, it's either 114 or 144. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that I've read that, but there are a couple of synopses on the website that you can look at that will give you the gist of it. Find the button to use. Let's do it this way. Okay. Touch on just a few of the things that Dr. Ullman touched on this morning, partly just to refresh what he said, to reinforce what he said, partly because I already had the presentation finished before I knew that he was going to use the same PowerPoint presentation that I'd pulled my information from. First is the need for the study. As y'all, many of you will remember, this particular research project came out of our group. We were the ones that initiated it, and fortunately it was passed by the larger group and funded. Some of the needs were practitioners and field personnel, with the mistaken opinion that more is always better. And as you know, a lot of our folks who work out in the field, they love toys. If they see another vehicle out there in the workplace with more lights on it than they got, then they want more lights. And we deal with that on a regular basis. Also a risk existing that overmarking or overlighting our vehicles, our equipment, presents a hazard, and I think we saw from Dr. Ullman's presentation this morning that that is definitely one of the outcomes that they found in the project, and the fact that manufacturers continue to provide more visually stimulating products. I like the way they said that, visually stimulating. I think we found from some of his comments this morning that basically what it does is partially blind or distract the drivers coming up on our work zones. Their project objective was to develop guidelines in order to select applications of color, reflective markings, and lighting. We're going to talk specifically about lighting today. One of the other guys may have some comments about markings. Wasn't really my intention to deal with markings because we're talking about lighting. One of the project tasks that he talked about earlier today was that we did not want our vehicles and equipment to be confused with authorized emergency vehicles. So that's one of the tasks that they were given. Project task number 6 was to execute phase 2 studies, which included the static closed course studies that Dr. Ullman talked about, the dynamic closed course studies, and field evaluations, and then prepare the final report and implement the guidelines that they recommended. He offered us 4 objectives. First was to attract the attention and to provide adequate warning of vehicles and equipments present. I think we all have stories from our own individual departments of wrecks of workers hit and killed or badly injured in the workplace. Second was to assist in determining the appropriate driving action approaching work activity. To not be confused with authorized emergency vehicles, as I just mentioned, and then to not adversely affect drivers' abilities to detect and recognize vehicles or equipment. In several of our presentations today, we have seen where the lights that we're using can often become just utter chaos, and some of you may even have approached work zones before, and there's such a kaleidoscope of lights going on, you really don't know what direction to go. Just a few years ago, I was traveling on state business. I had left Grove Hill, Alabama, headed to Mobile, Alabama, and in Jackson, there was an accident. It was about 5:30 in the afternoon. It was later in the year when it starts getting dark, kind of early. It was wet, and there was an accident that had been moved. The vehicles involved had been moved to a turn lane, 2-lane highway with a turn lane. And there were about 4 police cars on the scene. As I passed one of the police cars, one of the police officers stepped out from behind the bumper of his Dodge Charger. He was wearing a reflective vest, but because of the wet and because of the amount of blue light, it completely washed out the reflectivity on his vest. I never saw him until my mirror passed him. And my mirror was probably within 2 feet of him when I passed him. Now that will scare you. One of the takeaways I got from Dr. Ullman's presentation this morning was this particular slide that showed the changes of speed on either 4-lane or 2-lane highways. And what struck me was that only at Site 3 was there a significant reduction in speed. They can talk about speed being reduced on these other 3 sites, but look at the reductions. I mean, we're talking 0.3 miles per hour. You know, average traffic went from 71.9 to 71.6. And that was on a 4-lane highway. We can assume the speed limit was 70. He reduced the speed, and he's still above the speed limit. The only one that was reduced was the 2-lane highway that was in the 40s. And I also noticed, and one of the reasons I asked the question this morning about the move-over laws is the percentage of move-overs here. And I've noticed when I travel through states that now have move-over laws, there seems to be a predisposition now for people to move over. I'm seeing more and more traffic move over for stopped vehicles on the side of the road, trucks on the side of the road. Not only your emergency vehicles and your service vehicles, but also standard vehicles. I think that's a good thing up to a point. A friend of mine takes great pleasure in pointing out that some of the traffic in the right-hand lane sees flashing lights on the shoulder of the road, slams on the brakes and cuts to the left without paying any attention to what's behind him on the left. Y'all may have had that to happen to you. He gave us his conclusions this morning. I won't go through all 3 slides of this. We heard him talk about it this morning. And then talked about implementations that the research committee would have recommended that we try to implement. The one interesting recommendation that they brought is that we have different classifications of equipment out there on our highways and work zones. And each of these classifications of equipment bring different needs to the table. So I'm very happy to see that they address these classifications of vehicles and equipment differently to show the difference in their work areas, their work zones, and the different lighting and markings that they need. What surprised me, though, was as you go through each of these classifications of equipment, you find some very close commonalities. For instance, their proposal on daytime brightness on all of these except the heavy equipment was 1,200 candela or greater, and nighttime no more than 1,200 on every one of these classifications of equipment except the heavy equipment. They also recommended multicolor on each of these classifications except heavy equipment. They talk very specifically about amber and green. They do mention white, blue, or red if your state laws will allow it. They also talked about the speed of the flash, either slow or alternating. And then they talked about the candela. On your heavy equipment, they recommended 300 candela. One of the notes that I drew from earlier in his presentation, there was a slide that mentioned drivers who were 55 or older took more time to detect and recognize the presence of a work zone or employees in that work zone, and especially at 400 feet. I want to leave something with you that's relative to that 400 feet. If you'll remember, they did the static tests at 400 feet and at 100 feet, and the dynamic tests. 400 feet is a football field plus 100 feet. Okay, 1 1/3 football fields. At 40 miles an hour, it takes you 6.8 seconds to travel 400 feet. And that's at 40 miles an hour. They did not reference a single work zone in this study at 40 miles an hour. They were all traveling faster than that. At 100 feet, that's 1.7 seconds. Psychological studies have shown that the human mind takes almost a second to recognize a threat and then to decide how to respond to it. You've just lost 1/3 of the time that you had available to respond to that threat in front of your automobile. So remember that when you start thinking about the flashing equipment, the colors, the lights on your assets, and when you talk to your decision makers at your organization on how to change or how to improve the assets that you have. I'm going to pass the podium now to each of these gentlemen. Let them come up and tell us what they're doing in each of their states, introduce themselves, and tell you where they're from, and then what they're doing in their locations. If I can get this off the screen. All right. Jim, you want to start?
I'm Jim Beach, South Carolina DOT, Director of Supply and Equipment. The last time our hazard lights were addressed was about 2015, I believe. They came out with a policy. It was in response to having a couple gentlemen get killed on one of our roads. So they came out with, well, safety office came out with a policy that we had to adhere to. So since then, I came aboard on 2019, and we started looking at every one of our packages, and we developed a package for every class of vehicle that we have. And they had a couple two-folds to it. We wanted to make sure we standardized across the states. That's a very important thing because you got the Wild Wild West. Even in South Carolina, you got the Wild Wild West. When you have 7 districts, that means 7 kingdoms, 46 counties, that means 46 mini kingdoms. So you all can imagine they want one extra light here or one extra light there. So we decided to standardize each class, each truck, each piece of equipment. Also, that also helps us with when we order equipment. When we order backhoes, skid steers, or any kind of large piece of equipment, we have the vendor go ahead and put the light package on it. That way my depot doesn't have to take it apart like a Tonka toy and put it back together. A backhoe now comes into our yard, and we can put it out and issue it in about 3 days to a county because it already has the lights on it. And all we got to do is put a radio in it and some stickers on it. So that kind of benefited that. Having said that, though, we weren't very comfortable with how many lights. I've always had in the back of my mind that we were really too bright. I'll tell you, our dump trucks right now have about $5,000 worth of lights on them, and they're all LED 1, so you can just imagine how bright we are. All of even down to our construction vehicles, like pickup out there, they'll have about $1,500 worth of lights, and it's all LED 1. So it's a bright, very bright, and almost too bright. And it's always been that way in the back of my mind. So when this research was in play, I was very excited, waiting for the results to come out. And when it came out first this year, I put our district fleet people together and said we need to start updating our package in accordance to what the recommendations are. So the great thing about it is they come out with a chart. All we got to do is fit our vehicles inside that chart, and then it kind of dictates what we need to do for each class. It also brings it back into my office instead of into the safety office, because we all love safety people. We really do. They're great people, but they need to stay where they're at, because they don't live in our same world. They just don't live in our same world. So we're going to bring back the policy into our office and make some minor adjustments. In light of this discussion we've had today, this has been great discussion about lights. I know fleet guys get excited about certain things, and lights is one of those things. So we're updating our package. My takeaways of today that I looked at that I know I need to go back to is I always thought that synchronizing and sequencing was a very important thing. We use, we're non-Wayland, so Wayland seems like they're a little ahead of the game with the synchronizing and the sequencing. I'm not pushing for them or whatever, but we don't get to use them. But I think we need to go to synchronizing and sequencing. I really do. I really love the warning light delete part. I just did not realize how much I liked it until I saw the picture on it. So that's the good stuff. Other than that, that's what South Carolina's doing. We're actually in the process of updating, and we're going to be a little bit stronger when I get back in a few weeks to my office. I still got a lot of touring to go before I go back to South Carolina, so 12 days of travel is ahead of me. So I appreciate y'all.
I'm Jeff Pfeiffer. I'm with the West Virginia Division of Highways. I'll just start out. Back in 2015, before I was with the Equipment Division, I was in maintenance, and I've been a representative, West Virginia's representative with Clear Roads since around 2012. Around 2015, the Equipment Division director at that time approached me and wanted to know what the the best color was for trucks. At the time, we were running white with a blue and gold retro-reflective stripe on it and a retro-reflective state badge. He wanted to switch to something that was a little bit more conspicuous and on theme for West Virginia, which our colors are blue and gold because of the border of our flag is blue and gold, and also the state university, the Mountaineers, are blue and gold. But I did some research, and there wasn't much out there. I found one DuPont paint study that was from back in the 60s or early 70s, and was able to get that through the representative from Massachusetts that was at Clear Roads. And we arrived at yellow, which is where we used to be. Our trucks used to be yellow with blue on the tops of the hoods or blue fenders, and I think some of them even had blue on the top of the cabs, but a blue and gold paint scheme. But we ended up going back to a school bus yellow with blue conspicuity tape on them, 2 stripes. And that came out as a result of the feedback that I got from Clear Roads and the paint study from DuPont. And then I also chaired a synthesis that we did that looked at striping, lighting, and paint colors for the plow trucks, which, you know, arrived at some different theories. But one of the main takeaways was, for your paint color, you want something that is not natural in the environment. And that's why your fire trucks on your airports have that weird, I don't know, is it chartreuse? Is that the color, the name for it? Because that's not something that's naturally found in nature. School bus yellow, I don't know that that's something that's not found in nature, because there's an awful lot of yellow flowers and stuff out there. But school buses have been yellow from the get-go, and I think they just picked that color, and it turns out that yellow is not far behind that chartreuse. So they got lucky on the yellow, and it's a pretty good color. We've had a lot of positive feedback from the public as far as our color, not just because they like the way it looks, but because they can see them better. At nighttime, the yellow lights up better than the white, and in snowstorms, the yellow gives you a little bit better contrast with the snow, or if you're in fog or rain, that yellow stands out a little bit better. So now I'll jump forward to lighting. Ohio Department of Transportation, the Clear Roads representative was Scott Lucas at the time, and I had been through Ohio and seen their green lights, and I really liked them. So I went to my upline when I was in maintenance to try to get them, and I was told that we couldn't have green because somebody said it in the western states, green means go. And they didn't want people coming up behind our trucks and thinking it was a green light, which I know there's some pretty slow drivers out there, but they're not going to find a green light on the interstate on a truck moving along. But anyways, got a lot of pushback. So it's been an ongoing thing with me since about 2016 that I've been pushing this green light thing, and I keep getting them to take it across to the legislature, and then they just don't have any interest in hearing about green lights. We, much like Stan, I can run any color as long as it's amber, but if you come through West Virginia, I'm not going to deny that you may see some trucks with amber and white, because much like South Carolina, we have 10 districts, 55 counties, and they all have their own way of wanting to do things. I had even caught wind that maybe some of our northern panhandle trucks were running green lights on theirs too, but they're not doing that through the equipment division. They're doing that through their little fiefdom. But they're trying to do something to protect their employees. But we, like has been stated here before, we want to standardize, and that's the direction we've moved. As all this stuff was going on up here today, I'm like firing off emails to the lady that's my contact, that's our go-between between the legislature, and I'm feeding her all this information. And somebody put that slide up with the colors. I can't remember what state that was. Was it Montana? And at the bottom it said you can see green the best. Which state was that? It was Montana. Okay. That was perfect. I sent that to her, and she goes, when you can put a people factor on it, that's what we're looking for. So maybe that's the nudge I need to get green lights at West Virginia. Everything moves very slowly in state government. That's the one thing I figured out in my career, and I've learned to, like, you know, you just got to keep chipping away at the stone. So that's about all I've got to offer as far as lighting and conspicuity. I'm trying. It's just an awful lot of hurdles in front of me, so. Who's taking questions at the end or now, or? Wait till the end. Perfect.
Good afternoon. I'm Ken Hampton from Tennessee. Jim, when you made a comment that you have not updated your light package since 2015, we have not done that since 2015. So I was really struggling to call this innovation since it's been that long. Yeah. So I will tell you, we in our 3 areas, heavy equipment, we do spec all of our heavy equipment to come with emergency lighting, flash, strobes, etc. So when that's delivered, we don't have to do anything to that. Much like the other gentleman here on the platform, Tennessee is a amber and white only state. So every vehicle we have, we do own our pickups all the way up to our big dump trucks. So every vehicle we have, amber and white lights only. We do have an exception to that. We have our help trucks, or our safety patrol trucks. They were classified, I believe it was around 2011, they were classified as emergency response vehicles. So they actually do have amber, white, and red. So they think they're a little bit special, but we have to deal with it. And that's a group that always wants to add more lights. They just don't have enough lights. Always want to add more lights. So every year when we're reviewing their specifications, that's the fight to say, no, we're not going to add any more lights. We do have a group of trucks that we identify as tech supervisor trucks. They're basically district level supervisors. About 4 years ago, we started upfitting those with message boards. We currently have about 60 of those with message boards because they are also incident response trucks. We tried to get them classified as emergency response. That did not go over because the legislation said 80% of the time they are a maintenance truck. So they're not allowed to have red either. We have about 40 more of those trucks that currently have arrow boards on them. We're working on getting those upgraded to message boards. I'll talk to you a little bit about our dump trucks. Of course, it is a standard amber and white. We do have, on our cab shield, we use 4-inch Wayland 400 VTRs. They're as warning lights, 2 facing the forward, 2 facing the back. The back are on swivels so that as they raise the bed, that will stay parallel to the ground, and anybody behind them can still see those lights. All of our vehicles, from the pickup truck all the way up through our biggest dump truck, we are using the black and yellow conspicuity inverted V. So we add that to the back of every vehicle we have, except for some of the headquarters vehicles, they don't have that. On our light duty pickup trucks, we're currently using a Wayland Legacy Duo 55-inch light bar, and then along with that we use on each side we have the Duo Ions, and then we will use some undercarriage lights in some instances. Not all trucks will have that. We also have a second light bar that we use for the construction type groups, bridge inspection, those people who are not, in many cases, they're not as in a high profile area where they're more susceptible. So it's a little bit smaller light bar, but it's a Wayland Century mini light bar. And then we use the Wayland Ion LEDs forward-facing, and then the Wayland Vertex on the rear. So that's our basic light packages we use everywhere. We are in the process, since this study has come out, we're in the process of starting a review of our light packages, and that will impact everything from the pickups through the dump trucks. That's all I've got. Say there. I'll put his.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Rick Durham with Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. None of these guys up here mentioned it, but thanks to Stan, and Stan done such a wonderful job this afternoon, but at the 10 o'clock break, we were informed that, oh, by the way, you all will be presenting on innovative lighting. So I don't have any fancy slides this afternoon. In addition to that, I don't think I could touch on anything that hasn't already been touched on, but I will just give you a little insight as far as Kentucky and what we're doing with emergency lighting. As most up here have mentioned, for Kentucky, legislatively, in accordance with our local laws, our state laws, we're amber white, can't use anything outside of that. We've been legislatively looking at some things as far as how we present that. So thanks to the slides that we've seen earlier there, we've got a little insight as to how that's possibly something that we can introduce and maybe get our foot in the door to have that conversation with those that need to make that happen. On our dump trucks, those that we're using a round beacon, because we're 360 on whatever we're putting lighting on vehicles. On our dump trucks, our snowplow trucks, we're using an amber beacon, and then we're using amber white at the rear with a 4-inch round. On our small vehicles, our light-duty vehicles, our pickups, our what we call baby dumps, which are 550s, 650s, 750s, and things of that nature. On those, we're upfitting those with a 44 and a 51-inch light bar. We have some current policy, like was it Jim, I think, or someone that had mentioned about safety. Our safety folks kind of holds that torch. But of course, of most recent for our state, we have 12 districts and 120 counties, and every district has a safety committee. In addition to that, we have a statewide safety committee that I get pulled in on, and everything that we go is pretty much tied to safety, and they have a good control on things as far as I don't think anymore we can hold an operator responsible for anything. We try to buy equipment and buy our way out of things is typically what comes up in those safety meetings. But anyway, with that being said, we have a level 1 and a level 2 with our safety committee or our safety team, and from that we're looking to revise that safety 1 being, or a level 1 being a mini light bar, and that being a 22-inch bar with front and rear and side-facing lights for light-duty vehicles. And then when we talk level 2, and that's interstate parkways and vehicles that are dispatched in those locations, that becomes level 2, and then increased bar size along with that 360 visibility for us. So, as I said, I don't have any nice fancy slides, and plus with some of the things that I've seen today, I'd be a little embarrassed to provide some of those things. So, very insightful for the things that we've seen this afternoon and this morning as well. Definitely some takeaways that I have for us in increasing our visibility on the roadways, along with some of the studies that we took part of. I will follow up on as far as ours. Ours is a little dated from 2015, probably like most of you in the room. Our University of Kentucky Transportation Center, they done a research project for us, and in that finding, especially with our current laws that we have, we're tied to amber and white, and basically from that it came out of as far as the placements of that lighting, the height of that lighting, and in those places where you increase your visibility. But anyway, that's all I have to offer this afternoon. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you all.
Thank y'all. Are there any questions?
Questions? I just want to give them a Anybody? Hold your hands up. So, Michael Register with Florida Department of Transportation. We recently had a legislative change allowing FDOT and contractors on high-speed roadways to flash green, red, amber, white within construction zones. Got a little bit of feedback from the executive group up in Tallahassee, and they said that we can do that within maintenance zones, on construction equipment, and light vehicles on roadways greater than 55 miles an hour. So we've been upfitting these vehicles with these red and green lights on separate switches, red or amber and white on roadways less than 55, red, green, amber and white on roadways greater than 55. And I got a text from my buddy, Leesburg Operations, after we upfitted his truck, and he sent me a text, said, "Good heavens, I pulled over on the side of the road today where the crews were working. I turned on my new light bar, and I caused a traffic jam with everybody slowing down." And I replied to him, "Well, it works." And he said, "Glad to see you still have a sense of humor." So the green and the red do capture attention. The green is way more visible than any other color other than blue. So, you know, I was kind of skeptical on it at first until I saw it in action. So it is well worth the push to put green lights on the back of these vehicles.
Anybody else? Going once,
Going twice.
going twice?
Gone.
Well, thank y'all.